and he came along at the right time. And I'm sure he didn't think it was a great thing at the time, but the financial crisis of 2008 and the sort of devastation of the Bush presidency and the massive Democratic margins that were swept in with Barack Obama in 2008 really did give him a historical opportunity. And he used it. Those first 2 years will go down in history on par with FDR's most successful legislative period and LBJ's.
Let's pause on that.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most dramatic opening of a presidency in American history, which is FDR's. And you think that the Obama experience in the first year or two was the equivalent?
I wouldn't say it's the same, but the fact that he passed the Affordable Care Act, which changes one's relationship with insurance companies, can no longer be denied insurance because of a pre-existing condition. That's important. The Dodd-Frank reform bill that really did change a lot of the rules of the way Wall Street works. That's a big deal. An $800 billion stimulus that first year that was stuffed with Democratic priorities that would have made, Bill Clinton tried to pass a $16 billion stimulus when he was president and barely got it through. So I think the enormity of those first 2 years often gets lost because there was so much going on. There was so much legislation being moved that we forget how important some of that stuff is. Throw in the automakers' bailout. Things ground to a halt after that, and there's no doubt that those first 2 years produced a dramatic conservative backlash that defined the next 6. But those two alone, I think, mean that he will be regarded in that pantheon that you talked about at the beginning, David.
And yet, those first 2 years are often pointed to as the source of so much resentment. That the economic rescue program by the Obama administration is often pointed to as the source of white working class resentment because jobs were not the priority so much as financial repair, that the repair was done by people from Goldman Sachs, et cetera, et cetera. You know the outline of the campaign message in this last go-around. Amy, how do you assess those first 2 years in particular?
I think that Ryan pointed to two really important moments of forgetfulness that things are sometimes strangely harder to remember when you're closer to them than when you're farther away. I think we might find that with exactly how precipitous the moment was and how much was accomplished in terms of they could really, really push and build on.
Ryan, we hear a lot about the temperament of Barack Obama, a certain kind of dignity that's now being contrasted all the time with someone who tweets about the steel union president or has things to say on Twitter at the middle of the night. There's a big contrast between the Trump temperament and the Obama temperament. By the way, both of whom won national elections.
As Obama would say, twice.
Yes. But in the Obama case, was there any downside to that temperament of restraint, subtlety, elegance, and the rest when it came to politics itself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because if there's one downside to it, you might argue that Obama he didn't take advantage enough of the majorities he had in his first 2 years.
On what issues in particular?
The two big ones, and look, there's only so much bandwidth that Congress Congress has. So the response to my argument would be, no, nothing else could have passed in those first 2 years. But the two big domestic priorities that he had that never had another chance were immigration reform and the climate change bill, the cap and trade bill. Now, I've argued in the past that he didn't push hard enough on the climate change bill, and he actually could have passed it. Others who know the Senate very well think that's wrong, and that there's no way some of those coal state Democratic senators ever would have come around on that issue.
This is an existential issue. I mean, no matter what we're hearing from the new EPA person under Trump and so many climate change deniers, I think it is widely understood that this issue, come 20 years from now or 50 years from now, we will look back and rue the day that we didn't pay sufficient attention to this. Did Barack Obama move quickly enough, or did we fiddle while Rome burns?
I think that there is nobody on this planet who has done enough really for this. I mean, maybe a few scientists, but he can point to things, to boxes he's checked on climate change, but no, and to make it durable, to make it something that even Donald Trump can't roll back, to get it going. I mean, he's been mocked for saying that climate change is a national security priority, but he obviously believes it. It's just, I think we're all going to be a little bit ashamed as a generation, as a country, as these things go on. Has he done enough on climate change? Nobody has done enough on climate change.
And it really is the trickiest political problem, because it's short-term pain, and you do have to admit there's pain associated with addressing climate change economically, for a gain that to most Americans won't really be seen or felt, except that we will avert catastrophe. And that's such a difficult political case to make, because, as you both know, nothing gets done in Washington unless there's an acute, immediate emergency.
What is with these pathetic
This is the human question about politics, and we heard it during the campaign. This politician has no
Aqui
choice.
pode
This
virar
politician
à
has
direita
to
no
do
sinal
this.
vermelho.
There's this
Mas só quando
position
não
in
vem
the
a cá.
Republican Party, so he has to back Donald Trump,
você
or
virou
he
no
has to
vermelho.
say that. This sense of what
Proibido, não, aqui não é
idea that
proibido.
politicians
How is that
have.
not
Você não tem
pathetic?
sinal
It's
proibido
utterly
virando vermelho.
pathetic, and
Você pode
it's
virar,
something that
mas
has to be challenged at
nesse
every
caso aqui eu não posso,
every
tá vindo
turn,
carro.
and I think in the next 4 years has
Se não
to be
vier,
more.
você
And
poderia
I would
virar.
put this on. There are areas where Obama has
Trabalha ali,
suffered
gente,
from
Gordon. Essa
this
loja
too,
aí,
not
tá
just
tudo
in
isso aí na
climate
frente
change.
aí, a loja.
Guantanamo,
Tem
the
um
idea
restaurante aí
that
que faz
that it
parte da loja.
can't be
Mas
closed
o resto tudo
politically.
é da
I'm
loja.
going to risk your ire and maybe those of our listeners to saying Guantanamo, well, it's absolutely an issue that's deeply troubling when, in legal terms, civil liberties terms, we're talking about a very small handful of people and not an existential threat to the planet.
I would agree in that you could say that about almost anything in climate change. Right? You could say that about Obamacare and climate change on some levels, but I wouldn't underplay Guantanamo. When we talk about Guantanamo, we're not just talking about X number of people in this base.
You're talking about principles of
We're not just talking about
Todo dia vai
principles
ser
either. We're
assim,
talking about
os caras
legal
trabalhando aí.
mechanisms that have been put in
Os
place.
caras ganham uma
and in
grana,
some ways
rapaz, tirando essa
fortified
neve
under
aí.
Obama.
Onde é
We
que eu vou botar o
have
carro?
now process for indefinite
sei.
detention without trial.
Tá aqui do lado
You,
desse,
you
não
don't
morrer.
need a lot of people in Guantanamo for Guantanamo
You make
to
an
matter.
excellent point. You make an excellent point. Now, Barack Obama came to the presidency and managed to win in his campaign against Hillary Clinton in 2008 with a great difference on one issue. It was Iraq. It was foreign policy. And he leaves office now claiming to have ended the war